I have a client, let's just call her Bobby. Bobby is a physician and she's the clinical director for a large amount of clinics that serve the community. She is working to implement change around the way clients are served through the clinical system. And she calls me and she tells me that she's facing resistance from the nurses. She can't get them to apply the required changes that have come down from her leadership. So it's a conundrum, right? She's the boss. She's in charge. She's the one who should be listened to, right? She doesn't have the influence, right? And she doesn't have buy-in. So we're going to talk a little bit about change and buy-in and what's really happening with Bobby and how she can get her staff to move forward to make the changes she needs to see. So let's go back. Let's go back a little bit before we even get to Bobby and her problem. And let's think about putting yourself in her shoes. Before you come into an organization, before you take on a role, before you take on a project, ensure you gather all of the information from the people who are giving you that project, be it your CEO, a VP, a director that's over you. Really set yourself up for success, right? I remember I had a manager at Johnson & Johnson years ago when I was being mentored. And one thing he said to me was, LaVada, never let anybody set you up for failure, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to do our research before we even take on a change initiative, especially one as big as the one Bobby is taking on. So there's some questions we want to ask the leaders who are giving us this assignment. The first thing we want to ask is the history. What is the history with this group, with these type of changes, with the culture and with the organization, especially if you are a leader who is new to the culture in the organization, okay? Maybe you are not new to the culture in the organization, so some of these questions you could answer or you have the answers to. But for anyone who is giving you an assignment, write out at least 10 to 20 questions you want to ask them. And the reason I say 10 to 20 is because it's going to make you think, right? It's going to make you focus. How do I get 10 questions out, right? So that I can really get some clarity around this project, right? So the things we want to know is, what's the history? What's the history of the change? What's the history of the culture of the people that I'll be working with? What kind of support will I get from you as my leader? What kind of support will I get? When I'm facing resistance, is there some help that I can get, some coaching? How involved will you be as a leader, for example? What's the budgetary dynamics around this? What are the budgetary implications, right? Are there any restrictions around budgets for the change? If I find that I'm facing any barriers, will I be able to hire someone to help me? These are all questions you want to ask up front, right? So you want to get as much information about the process, the people, and the history around any massive change that you're going to make, especially at a leadership level as high as Bobby's, right? Okay, so once you determine that you have success and you have a clear understanding of what's happening with the change and the support you're going to get, and hopefully you get some satisfactory answers that allow you to have some decreased level of stress as you go into such a large change, then you think about the team, right? So when we talk about buy-in, right, we want to identify the people that we need to get buy-in from. Having information is great. Having resources to help you expand upon that information is even better. Click on the QR code and you can go to our online course library where you'll find more information on this topic. In addition, you'll find other helpful topics for your team and for yourself. The project could be large in scope, enough that that's both internal players and external players. Let's just focus on your team for now. Let's focus on buy-in from your team. After Bobby's gotten the information from her boss, now she's going to go over and try to implement the changes. Okay. Now, what she could be thinking is, these changes have come from my boss. We've had an announcement, for example. Everybody knows they need to happen. Everybody's on board. That's what she could be thinking. And that's usually not the case. Remember what I always say, right? Remember that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And that 70% of change initiatives fail. So those change initiatives have support from higher ups, but they still fail. Okay. So let's put that aside. There's a directive, but it doesn't mean that the people who are on the front line are going to take the directive or are going to do what you need them to do. Okay. So now we have our group that's on the front line. In this case, it's the nurses. So the first thing we want to do with our frontline people is we want to verify what we learned about the history and the culture from our boss. Yes. Pause for a minute. I want you to ask the questions from your boss, but I also want you to verify that information with the staff. Here's why. Your boss's interpretation of the history and the culture and situations that happened in the past could be different from the people who actually have to live out and do the work that you need them to do, right? So don't gather information from your superiors and assume you have all the information, right? Okay, you know what people say about assumptions. So you have some context you want to get from your boss, but then you want to follow up and ensure that they're in alignment. I don't even know how long your boss has been there. Maybe your boss has only been with that department or that organization for a short period of time, right? But certainly their lens is different. So I want to ask the people who actually have to do the work what the history and the culture is with change. And if they've had some attempt at this type of change you're trying to make, definitely ask the specific questions, right? So here are some questions you can ask each of them. You know, what are your concerns about the change? What history have you had? Is there anything that I should know? Anything that I should be aware of? Is there any support that you can provide me? Ask them all the questions, right? And if you find that you can talk to the group together first, that's fine. And then pull people aside and talk to them one-on-one. Change takes time, right? Change takes time. Don't try to gather information through an online survey. That's a mistake. Don't try to gather information through email. That's a mistake. Whenever there's real change happening, you need to talk to people face to face, right? So let's go over what we talked about already, because there's a lot. First, we want to gather context, right, from our boss. We want to make sure that we're not being set up to fail. We want to gather all the information we can. Then we want to verify that information with our staff, okay? Culture, history, past information, right? And then we want to set up a time where we talk with the group. And then more than likely, you're going to want to talk with people one-on-one, okay? Now, if you're totally new to the organization or the department or that group, totally new to leading that group, then you have to take the time to get to know them, right? If you're not new and you're new to leading this new large initiative, you have to still take the time to slow down to get context, okay? So you're talking to them one-on-one, you're looking to get buy-in, okay? All of this is about buy-in, right? So once you've gathered some history about the culture and context from the actual frontline individuals who will be living out and executing the change, you want to start to identify who's the influencer of the group or who are the influencers. Maybe there's more than one. Who's the most vocal? Who's the most influential? Who do you need to really get on your side, if you will, so that there will be a decreased level of resistance amongst the team? Because the influencer is going to be the one that the people listen to, not you. You're working to become the influencer with all these techniques I'm giving you and these ways that I'm asking you to slow down. You're working to become the influencer, but you're not the influencer yet, okay? Especially if you're new to the organization or you're new to the change or you're new to that department as a leader. You're not the influencer because you have a title. Write that down. You're not the influencer just because you have a title. You are there to identify the influencer. You're working on being the influencer, and you're going to get there with patience and respect, right? a admiration, if you will, for the influencer, and express admiration and appreciation for the influencer. Okay. So now you're identifying the influencers. Okay. So you need to get on their good side. So what do you need to do in order to partner with the influencer? Well, one of the things I would say is ask them to partner with you. Let them know, hey, I need you to help move this forward. Okay. Would it be possible for you to help me? Now, we have a set of questions that we use in conflict resolution that can help you. I'll include the QR code. It's complimentary for you to download. Those questions, over 100 questions, actually it's 200 questions. Those 200 questions help you to form a conversation with people to get information, right? In this case, the conflict is you need to get their buy-in. So those conflict resolution questions can help you. So I'll include that QR code and you'll be able to download that in case you get stuck. You're just like, well, what questions am I asking people, right? Okay. So you want to ask them the questions that will help you to understand, how do I get you to help me make this change, right? Now that conversation is going to help you to next assess the level of resistance you're dealing with. Okay. So you've gotten some history, you're verifying the history, right? You're working on getting buy-in, right? Getting information, identifying the influencer and getting information from the influencer. And now you're assessing what level of resistance am I dealing with, right? If it's a high level of resistance, I might need to go back to my boss and talk about our technique, what we're going to do. Maybe we need to slow this down, right? See if we can get more time to get buy-in. If it's a lower level of resistance, great. You get to start to build a partnership with the influencers, right? So now you've identified your level of resistance, right? You've identified your influencers. Okay. Now, if you don't have a very high level of resistance and you kind of don't need to go back to the drawing board with your boss, then you can start to form a partnership with the influencers and put together a strategy for getting everyone else on board. Having information is great. Having resources to help you expand upon that information is even better. Click on the QR code and you can go to our online course library where you'll find more information on this topic. In addition, you'll find other helpful topics for your team and for yourself, right? So that means that I'm helping, the influencers are helping me communicate the change and hopefully helping me to put together processes for change, right? So now the influencer is seen as my partner across the department, right? And I am able to then gain the trust of the other people or the other folks that are working under me because they see that the primary influencer or influencers trust me, okay? So there's a lot of process that goes into buy-in, okay? It's not just go in and convince someone that they need to be doing what you want them to do because it's a directive from the boss. It's not going to work, right? That's why 70% of change strategies fail. Well, one of the reasons they fail is because we don't have buy-in. Buy-in is critical, okay? It's critical. Okay. Now, once you have the partnership and once you're developing the message, work with the persons or the influencers to set a realistic timeline. And again, we talked about this, I talked about this a few paragraphs back, if you will. But if you find that you're gathering information from the team that says that you need more time, then see if you can get more time before you implement a big change. Because again, you don't want to set yourself up to fail. Sometimes it feels like it's a sense of urgency, but we need to assess. Maybe there's not a sense of urgency here when it comes to this particular change, and we can slow it down, right? Out of respect for our frontline individuals, okay? So now you're working with them on a timeline, right? You're working with them, slowing it down if you need to, and you're continuing to build out that relationship and that trust with the team. And you have to remember that you are being watched and you're being tested this entire time to see if you're going to live out the things you're saying you're living out in terms of partnering with people. Okay. Now, remember, as I've talked about in other videos, sometimes people carry traumas with them. They carry traumas related to change in the workplace. They carry traumas related to former managers, former leaders, right? They have stuff, they have baggage, right? And so they're not sure whether they want to trust you, trust the change, trust the process. They might not like your boss. There's so much, right? I know it's like a lot of psychological stuff that happens with leadership, okay? But here's what I don't want you to do. When I was talking to Bobby, I said, so what have you done so far to try to get the change implemented? And she said, well, I keep telling them why it's necessary to make this change and why it would be better for our patients. I said, okay, so you keep explaining that to them. She's like, yes, I'm trying to explain it to them. It's like they just don't get it. And so my question to her was, what would make you think they don't get it? What would make you think that they don't understand that, what you're saying? What would make you think that they don't understand the necessity for the process to change? She said, well, because of the outcome, right? Because they're not doing what I say. And I say, could it be, perhaps, think about the fact that it could be that they don't feel involved, right? They don't see the value, okay? And they don't feel involved, right? So the next step that's really important, or the next thing to understand about buy-in, is that it's important for people to see the value in the change for them. So what's at risk? What will I lose? You know, what will we lose? What do they value, right? So that you can see the value in them, right? Or the value for them. Okay. Sometimes change is harsh and we have to say, well, you know, hey, if we don't make this change, we're going to lose our jobs. That's a what's in it for me, right? But in many cases like this one, it's not that cut and dry, right? So what's in it for them to make the change? Where are their pain points? Maybe the staff feels burnt out. You know, maybe the staff feels like they're underperforming and they're not able to help the patients the way they want to. We need to talk to their pains and why this change is going to help them to have a better life at work, a better work life, right? Help them to get to the things that they want. But if we're not asking them what's important to them, then we won't know how to speak to them through that lens, okay? So we need to figure out what's in it for them. Why should they care, right? And especially if you're working in an environment where there's just not a lot of consequences. And sometimes in public agencies or healthcare environments, people know they're not going to be fired. I mean, they have to do extreme things to be fired, right? So what you have to influence and get buy-in is the relationship that you're building through taking these steps that show respect for them. Okay? All right? So once you know what's in it for them, right? Once you have the partnership, once you've verified history and context, once you know who your influencers are, and you know you have leadership support, then you can really get buy-in. You can get buy-in. And all of these things that I'm talking about have to be checked in often. Okay? You have to check in to ensure that you're still meeting the needs in all of these areas for yourself, right? With the relationship with your boss and the support, for the influencer, okay? And for the staff, right? And so here are some practical tips that I want to give you as well in terms of how you can ensure that that's happening, okay? Whenever you have a big change initiative, make sure you set up time for you and your boss to talk. Schedule time, not random time. Sure, you can make an agreement that if there's an emergency, you can check in. But if we're going to have time to check in weekly, especially because it's a big change, then make sure you set aside a scheduled time that's consistent to meet with your boss. Okay. What you're going to do before you get to meet with your boss is you're going to be writing down all of your questions and things that you know can wait until that meeting, right? And then you want to do the same thing for your influencers. You want to set up time with them weekly just to talk about the project. Don't overlap meetings. This is not a training about meetings. I do have a training about meetings, but what we want to do is we want to focus on this major change. This is what this time is for. It's not about talking about their performance, team complaints, compliance and things that they have to do that are outside the scope of this. This is a major project, so you want to talk to your influencers once a week, once every other week. You know how to gauge it, what your need is, but you want to check in with them often, okay? And then you want to set up time with your staff to check in, and you want to be consistent. So if you're meeting with them on a weekly basis, if there are people that are doing major part of the projects and they need major parts of the projects and they need to meet in with you often, but put together a grid, make sure you set up all these meetings and establish that this is going to happen because you want to make sure that you're staying in communication, okay? The other thing that you want to do in addition to setting up that time is you want to make sure that you keep your staff informed of updates. Project updates are important. Okay, don't let things fall off. There's change happening. They don't know what's happening for weeks on end. Let them know if there's a slowdown, if there's a speed up, if there's something that's important around pivoting and changing, let them know right away. Set time up to let them know. Okay. And then one more thing I want to encourage you to do is to set up time to thank them. Set up time to congratulate them. Set up time to show appreciation because change is hard. And so when you do that, what you're doing is you're acknowledging, right, their efforts. You're acknowledging that change is hard, okay? And you're respecting the fact that they are with you in the trenches, helping you to make those changes. And so whatever you can measure, hey, we were able to help, in Bobby's case, maybe we were able to help, 50 more clients, right, be better, okay? So if we go back to Bobby, the advice I gave her was all of these things that I've talked about in terms of getting buy-in, but I asked her to, stop it. Stop telling them something that they already know and ask them to be a part of the process. Ask them simply, why are you resisting this? What's going on? How can I be better? And would you be willing to help me? And it made all the difference in the world. She was able to work with her team. She was able to work with her influencers. And she was able to get her boss to slow things down so that she could build those relationships. Okay. So these are my buy-in tips. This is a lot. We have more information and more courses on change management and change communication. I'll give you the QR code to those as well. But thank you for listening and happy change. You can do it. You can do it. It's a lot, but you can do it. Having information is great. Having resources to help you expand upon that information is even better. Click on the QR code and you can go to our online course library where you'll find more information on this topic. In addition, you'll find other helpful topics for your team and for yourself.